Hi, everyone. Matthew DeSantis here with NYRA Bets, and it's Christmas. Breeders' Cup is here, and we got capping the card. All 9 races on Saturday, top pick, top value play, as well as ticket structure for you, helping you out, connecting you with hopefully some winning Pick 5 tickets. Now, before we get into it, make sure to press that like button and subscribe to the NYRA Bets YouTube channel. Subscribing is entirely free of cost, and we have great content for race previews, full card analyses, handicapping and betting tutorials, and so much more. Also, make sure to play the Breeders' Cup on NYRA Bets. If you use the promo code CUP25, you can get up to a $200 deposit match bonus and a free $25 bet. So make sure to play the Breeders' Cup on NYRA Bets. All right. Well, like I said, it is Christmas. For those of us who love horse racing, it's time to open the presents. It's Breeders' Cup weekend. I can't wait. If you haven't watched it already, I do have a video going over all 5 Breeders' Cup races for Juvenile Friday, so you can check that out as well. But like I said, this one is focused just on the 9 Breeders' Cup races on Saturday's card. So let's dive into it and get started with the filly and mare sprint. And we're starting with a price right out of the gate because that's how we do here on Capping the Card. And I'm going to go with a little bit of a hunch play here, and that is going to be the number 10 Scylla for trainer Bill Mott. Now, your morning line favorite in this race is the number 9 Ways and Means for Chad Brown. I have a lot of respect for Chad. I love that he cut this horse back to 1 turn. She's a really nice filly, but at 5 to 2 in the morning line, she is faced nowhere near the competition she is going to be facing on Saturday. She's coming out of a win in the Gallant Bloom Stakes against older fillies and Mare. That's wonderful. But here's the list of horses she beat in that race. Nick Style, Sterling Silver, Hot Fudge, and Pacific Rose. That's it. That's the list. And you know who's not on that list? Vava, Society, Scylla, even Soul of an Angel. These are horses that are just a lot tougher than what she's faced to this point, let alone a horse like Zietlos, who I'll get to in a second. So I'm going to be playing against Ways and Means. I'm also playing a little bit against Vava. You can see she's on the B level of my ticket. She's a really nice filly for Cherie DeVaux, who I have a ton of respect for. Irad Ortiz Jr., amazing jockey. And, but that last time out in the ballerina was a little concerning. And I do wonder, is she maybe a little over the hill? I don't know. Does she still have her A game? She's been training beautifully for Cherie, so that's good to see. Sired by Gun Runner. I always like those gun runners. And, certainly is capable at 7 furlongs. But it was a little concerning in that ballerina that she didn't get the job done at 7 furlongs, or at least make up ground, because that's usually when she excels, is that last furlong. It's where she really extends her lead or goes past her competition. So I do wonder maybe if Vava has kind of run her best races already. We'll see. Not coming into this race necessarily with the best form. But I don't want to bury the lead. My top pick is the number 10 Scylla at 10 to 1 for trainer Bill Mott. Big money Mike Smith up on the mount. And this is a horse that gives me a lot of confidence because of how Mott has managed her. Now, listen, you look at the pedigree, sired by Tappet, Dam Close Hatches, and is the full sibling to Tacitus and Batten Down. You would assume, hey, this horse is going to want as much distance as you want to give her. But her best races have generally been at 1 turn. And I think she's more of a 1-turn type of a horse. And I think she's more of a sprinter. Now, if there's a reason to be concerned about her, is that 4 of her 5 career victories have come at Churchill Downs. So maybe she's a byproduct of Churchill Downs. That certainly is a question. But she did win in debut at Keeneland. And she ran well last time out in the ballerina handicap. It was her placement in the ballerina handicap that I think is so curious. She had been kind of in the Distaff division. She had been running, she won in the Shawnee and she won in the Fleur de Lis. And you go, okay, she's kind of going to continue on. She's going to be running in the Breeders' Cup Distaff this year. Mott ships her out to Del Mar, runs her in the Clemenel Hirsch. So she has experience over this track. She goes straight to the lead. She ends up running second that day to Adair Manor. Adair Manor, prior to being retired, was probably going to be one of your top 2, maybe 3 choices in the Breeders' Cup Distaff. Very, very good horse. So no disrespect losing there. Here's the curious part. Bill Mott brings the horse back on 3 weeks rest, ships her across the country, and runs her in the Grade 1 ballerina. That's not a Bill Mott move to run a horse on 3 weeks rest, usually, let alone back-to-back Grade 1s, let alone shipping across the country on back-to-back Grade 1s. And, oh, by the way, this is coming off of a route race where you tired late, and now you're running in a 7 furlong sprint. She ultimately finishes second to Society, but was kind of chasing speed the entire time. I think the far outside post is going to be advantageous. Mike Smith knows how to ride this particular track, Del Mar, better than just about anyone. I think this horse presents tremendous value. Now, Society is my other A horse. And the thing about Society is there are times where she looks like a monster, and then there are times where you just scratch your head. She has been very lightly raced this year with only 2 races. In the Chicago, she tired late against Vava and Positano Sunset. But again, she hadn't run in 7 months. I'm willing to forgive that. She comes back in the Ballerina and runs an absolutely huge race and had kind of the perfect setup that day, kind of nominally chasing slow, speed in Money's Gold, and then taking over the top of the stretch and really being able to kick away and nobody really contesting her. She does tend to do her best, I think, when she gets the perfect trip. And so I do think there's a question of whether or not she gets the perfect trip here, but I do like that she showed the ability to rate a little bit last time out. That is a little bit of a new dimension for her. She typically goes gate to wire. So her ability to rate and to relax a little bit and allow another horse to go to the front, I think is going to be beneficial. She looks really tough in this spot at 3-1. So Scylla and Society are my 2A horses. Like I said, Vava kind of more on the B line along with Ways and Means. And then Zetlos. Zetlos is an interesting horse because she's run 7 furlongs once, going back to last August, or last summer, I should say. I think it was July, actually, but hasn't run 7 furlongs in a really long time. It's more of a 6.5 furlong specialist coming off consecutive stakes wins. This is absolutely a class test for her, but sired by Curlin, you would imagine 7 furlongs isn't a problem. And she likes the pace. She likes to kind of come from off the pace. So if things get too fast up front, this is a horse that will start picking up the pieces. And we've seen that at Del Mar before, where things get a little too fast and everybody starts to kind of come back. And suddenly you start to see these deep closers doing well. I can think of obviously kind of the famous example in the Distaff was Marsh Lorraine, but you could also look at a horse like Aloha West, who I believe won the sprint at Del Mar coming from off the pace. So you can see these sorts of off the pace runners sometimes do well in these sprints at Del Mar because there's just too much speed early on. We're going to get to that when we talk about the sprint a little bit later, but that's the way I'm going to be playing the Filly and Mare sprint. Very interested in this race, really intriguing field. Well, let's go to the turf sprint. And yes, you see it right, folks. I'm trying to beat Cogburn. That's how we're going to roll this time. And I just don't think there's a version of this early pick 5 or first kind of 5 races from race 4 to race 8. Where you just go single with Cogburn and then Thorpedo Anna in the next race. And maybe you kind of spread modestly in a few of the other races, and maybe you spread a lot in the Classic. So you could absolutely play that way. I'm going to try to beat Cogburn. And the reason I'm going to beat Cogburn is kind of 2 reasons. One, I don't think he's faced anywhere near this level of competition before. Bradsell, Believing, Big Evs, these are all far better horses than what he's faced before. And the other thing is the Kentucky Downs angle. Talked about it before. If you follow me on social media, you've probably seen me or Ed DeRosa or other people talk about it, is that since 2013, no horse that prepped at Kentucky Downs in their final race before the Breeders' Cup has gone on to win a Breeders' Cup race. 0 for 53. Yikes. That's not the number you like to see. Is Cogburn going to be 1 for 54? He's got the talent to do it for sure. But again, this has not been a particularly deep division this year. And the horses he's run against have not really stood out and been that great. So I do wonder just if all of a sudden he looks around and suddenly you see a horse like Believing and you see a horse like Big Evs and you see a horse like Bradsell. These are monsters. And for Bradsell, my top selection, 7-2 for Archie Watson with Holly Doyle aboard. A couple of reasons I like this horse. First of all, last time out, finished second over in Longchamp in a Group 1, over soft ground, willing to obviously forgive that effort over the going. The previous 2 races, won a pair of Group 1s, one at Curra, one at York, going 5 furlongs. Holly Doyle has always been aboard this horse, pretty much so his entire career except for the first race. And Bradsell's always been a horse I really liked. Going back to that Coventry, actually as a 2-year-old, that was a really cool race, and I really liked that horse in that race. Won a little bit of money on that horse in that race, and I think ever since then I assumed Bradsell was going to kind of break through, but it didn't really happen. Did come back and win the King's Stand Stakes at Royal Ascot as a 3-year-old, but it really wasn't until the 4-year-old year that really I think he's kind of come into his own with those 3 straight wins before the second place at Longchamp. has good speed. Here's the thing. Can sit off the pace a little bit. So that's important to point out as well. The far outside post is always a little concerning in these turf sprints at Del Mar because that turn comes up real fast. So that is a concern. Here's the other thing. Here's the weight that Bradsell has been carrying the last 3 times out. 137, 132, 139. He's carrying 126 on Saturday. So that's 11 pounds less than what he carried last time out and 13 pounds less than what he carried in the Nunthorpe Stakes, which he won. And you look at the last 3 times out for Cogburn, 125, 126, 121. That's what he was carrying, and he's ultimately carrying 126 again. So, Bradsell is 7-2. I just think that's the play for me. In terms of my other A-level horse is the number 6 Star Mystery. Looks so good in that quick call. And yes, lost to Cogburn, 3 back in the Jaipur. But here's the thing. That was coming off a long layoff, first start in North America, willing to forgive that. Looked dominant in the quick call, comes back in the Franklin at Keeneland, has a little bit of traffic issues, now gets William Buick aboard. I think this one is all systems go, 10-1. I know it's a filly running against the boys, but we've seen fillies have success in this race, willing to play this one on the A line of my ticket. Now, on the B line, sure, Cogburn's there. You'd be foolish not to put him there. I do think a horse like Motorious for Phil D'Amato is a perfect 3-for-3 at Del Mar and 3-for-5 winning at this distance. Would need to revert back to that kind of 2023 form a little bit, but I think was certainly moving in that direction when he won the Green Flash last time out. And so I think this one could be sitting on a pretty interesting effort at 8-1. Plus, it gives me the excuse to go Motorious. And as a fan of Duran, there's never enough times that I can do that. Now, my value play in this race is a little bit crazy. It's a little bit crazy. Number 4 Starlust, Ralph Beckett. And again, horse has carried 137 pounds the last 2 times out, now carrying 124. A little bit of an advantage. Finished, if you look at the race 2 back, the Nunthorpe, finished less than a length behind Bradsell and Believing. That, to me, is the race you key in on. Why not focus on the last time out at Longshot? Well, A, the soft ground. B, the horse ran into the frickin' rail. So that might just get in the way of a horse winning a race. So I think 30-1, you're getting a really big price on this horse. This horse has some races to run back to. Also, if you look, this horse is a little bit of an every other. This horse does have a little bit of fierceness in him in that regard, a little bit of an every other type of horse. This is the good every other in this potential race. 30-1, I think there's crazier things than including him on some of your deeper tickets and certainly including him underneath. And I think when you look to the outside, obviously Big Ebbs would be such a cool story. A horse that won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf Sprint last year, coming back with Tom Marquand aboard. Holly Doyle and Marquand are husband and wife, and so that would be kind of interesting to see that kind of pairing going first, second in this particular race. Not coming off a great effort last time out in that Nunthorpe against Bradsell and Believing, but does have a win in the King George, going 2 back at Goodwood. And I thought ran well against older competition in the King Charles at Royal Ascot before that. So a horse that maybe, hasn't necessarily proven to be elite against older horses, but that horse has speed, has loads of speed. So that was my other thought in the turf sprint. Now let's go to the Distaff, which, listen, if you're going to single, I don't necessarily love singling Thorpedo Anna, but she's the most obvious single for me in this sequence. And I know people want to try to beat her. And I know the most obvious horse to beat her, I think, is the number 9 Awesome Result from Japan. My question with this horse is the class. She's coming out of kind of the secondary circuit in Japan. And Japan has kind of 2 circuits. They have like a JRA and an NRA circuit. Or an NAR, I should say, not the National Rifle Association, the NAR circuit. And I say I'm cautious with it because you know who else came out of that circuit? Marsh Lorraine, when she won the Breeders' Cup Distaff at Del Mar 3 years ago. So you don't want to undersell that connection. Listen, the pedigree's there, sired by Justify, out of a deputy minister, Mare. So I'm not worried about distance. The horse can absolutely run for days. I do wonder just how good some of this competition has been. She looks the part on the track. I saw her up close and personal today in the paddock. She looks very calm, very composed, a perfect 7 for 7 in her career. I'm not necessarily sold on Raging Sea. That horse got the perfect setup two back in the personal ensign when Idiomatic and Randomized went at each other, and she was able to really run up and benefit from that. Yes, she won the Chuvy before that over horses like Shotgun Hottie and Misty Vale. That was fine. Before that, she finished kind of a non-factor fourth in the Ogden Phipps behind Randomized and Idiomatic and Pretty Mischievous. She won the Double Dog Dare off the bench over a horse like Scylla. But then last time out was just not good in the Beldame as the 1-9 favorite and barely winning that race. So I don't have the greatest feeling about her going into this race at 7-2. As a result, I look at Thorpedo Anna and I go, listen, she's got the versatility. If you want her to go straight to the front like she did in the Kentucky Oaks, she can do that. If you want her to rake from off the pace like she did in the CCA Oaks and in the Cotillion, she can do that too. If there was a race to beat her, it was the last time out, in my opinion. It was the Cotillion that she was going to lose because that was coming off that huge Travers effort on relatively short rest, coming back on less than a month's rest, and still ultimately getting the win there, despite facing significant, or I shouldn't say significant, but certainly some traffic issues, carrying 126 pounds. Now we're back to carrying 121. I think this horse just feels like a natural winner in this particular spot. I know people will say it's been a long campaign, Matthew. It has been a long campaign. This is kind of one of the funny things about horse racing fans. We moan about horses that don't have long campaigns. And then when horses do have long campaigns, we all we do is talk about fading them. So, maybe it's good to have a long campaign so we can fade them late. But, we kind of want to have our cake and, icing and eat it too. So, listen, it is going to be interesting to see how this race plays out. But I think Brian Hernandez Jr. can be aggressive and maybe go straight to the lead. Now, I do know Candide is getting the blinkers on the inside with Irad Ortiz Jr. aboard. Maybe she tries to go at Thorpedo Anna, but if she does, Thorpedo Anna's in the perfect spot. She's right outside of her. She's just going to track off the pace then. And Candide, while she's run well, really didn't prove to be any match for Idiomatic last time out. And, ran well in that Alabama 2-back going 1.25 miles, but again, not necessarily sold on Candide as the big threat. So ultimately, like I said, Thorpedo's my single. We'll see. I'm bullish on her chances here. I do think Awesome Result is the most likely winner, alternative winner to this, to Thorpedo Anna. And then, Candide and certainly Raging Sea are a little deeper on my tickets in terms of a C structure. And again, if I'm not singling Anna, then I'm tossing her from my ticket. That kind of should go without saying, that so that if I don't use the A version of my ticket here, then I'm going to only use my B and C horses, because you don't include a 4-5 favorite and 2 or 3 other horses. That's just a bad ticket structure, and that's how you end up getting chalk and end up really impacting your return on investment if you're going 2 or 3 deep with a 4-5 favorite. You don't want to do that. All right, well, let's go to the turf, and this is a tough race. The turf is a really tough race because I'm not 100% sold on Rebels Romance, 5-2 on the morning line for Charlie Appleby with William Buick aboard. The horse has had a bounce back 2024. I will say that. It really did not have a good 2023, has bounced back and run very well. I will say has been very well managed, I think, as well this year, running in Medan, running in Hong Kong, losing at Royal Ascot, and then winning in Germany last time out in the same prep race the horse used 2 years ago before going to Keeneland and getting the win in the Breeders' Cup Turf. Horse was 4 years old then, is now 6 years old now. I do wonder maybe things are slowing down a little bit for this horse. So I do have a couple of questions there. And you get the far outside 11 post. Now, William Buick is about as good as they come. He and Ryan Moore always put on a clinic when they come over here and ride. They also tend to be on the best horses. That certainly helps. But Rebels Romance, I'm going to try to play against. And the horse I'm going to use to do it is a horse I've always loved, which is Luxembourg. Luxembourg, very similar to Bradsell. Last 2 times out, carried 135, 135. Now we're carrying 126. I'm not a big weight person generally, but I'm not a big weight person when it's 118 to 121. Okay, I'm not going to get bent out of shape over 3 pounds. You start showing 9, 10, 12, in Bradsell's case, 13 pounds as a difference, that's significant to me. And that is something that I will take note of. Luxembourg is one of the only horses that has won a Group 1 at 2, 3, 4, and 5 years old. Incredibly consistent horse. Noted, carried 135 the last 2 times out, faded late both times. Going to the race 3 back, carried 128 with Ryan Moore aboard, who's aboard again today. Ryan Moore not aboard the last 2 times, and won the Coronation Cup going 1.5 miles. You know, the last couple of times those horses faced Economics, Auguste Rodin, Goliath, Blue Stocking, outstanding horses. I think this is actually an easier spot than what he's faced the last couple of times. Luxembourg, to me, at 12-1 presents outstanding value. If you look at some of the overseas markets, he's already about half that price. It makes me think he's going to take a little bit of money, obviously, here. I don't think maybe quite that much. The overseas markets are always more bullish on the Europeans, so that's something to keep in mind, but I think that's a horse I'm really interested in using. The other one in this race I like is Sharyar, the Japanese horse. This is a horse that probably should have won this race last year when he came over to Santa Anita and ran 3rd behind Auguste Rodin and up to the mark. And I would argue jockey Christian DeMuro might have cost the horse the race, kind of vacated a spot that I think ultimately put him in a slightly tougher position and kind of didn't allow him to get the best run at Auguste Rodin and up to the mark in those closing strides. Still managed to finish 3rd, though, that day. Horse has not won since that, hasn't won in a while. The horse actually hasn't won since 2022. But I think from a value standpoint, it's really interesting, and I think could be sitting on a nice effort. The horse doesn't run very often. Usually has, it's been very carefully managed. Is 6 years old, but this horse has won at the distance. Is 6 for 8 hitting the board at the distance. At the very least, this is a horse that I think you have to consider using underneath in some capacity. I'm including him on the A line of my ticket. I'm going 3-4 and getting a little risky with ultimately with my turf selections. Now, in terms of my B level ticket. Listen, JRB from France, I think it's very interesting at 4-1. I do question whether or not this horse has faced the class that he's going to face here, but this is a very talented 3-year-old who ran 2nd to Economics 2 back. He's a very good horse and has gotten a Group 2 and a Group 3 win in his own rate. But the time form rating, he'd need to take another step forward, in my opinion. He would need to get a little bit faster to run this distance. He's not run 1.5 miles yet. So I do have some questions there with JRB, but it's a very talented horse. Farbridge, the top American effort, coming off 2 outstanding efforts in the Sword Dancer and the Turf Classic. I think we finally have a jockey and horse that are on the same page. I say that because Joel Rosario loves to do an inside move, and there is no horse in racing that loves to go through an inside rail position more than Farbridge. This horse loves to cut through on the rail. And so I think you just see Joel and this horse are on the same page. Horse 1 up front, 2 back in the Sword Dancer, backed it up by winning from off the pace in the Joe Hirsch Turf Classic up at Aqueduct. So this one I think is also a perfect 2 for 2 at the distance the last 2 times out. Top American threat for sure in this particular race. We talked about Rebels Romance a bit. I think it would be foolish to fade that horse too far off of your tickets. And I do think that he'd be a really interesting alternative in some of these spots. Now, the number 6, like I said, we already talked about Farbridge there. And then the other horse that I was going to mention, 2 others very quickly. One is the number 10 Wingspan for Aidan O'Brien. I like this horse a lot. A relatively young horse and progressively has gotten faster. Think of this horse as like maybe another version of JRB, but has just kind of slowly gotten faster. Ran against Group 1 competition just a few weeks ago at the British Champions Fillies and Mares, finishing 2nd to Kalpana, who's a very, very good horse. And before that, finished 2nd by a neck at the Blandford. But this horse has gotten faster every single time out. Now, granted, loses Ryan Moore, who's taken up Luxembourg, which I think is kind of a note check mark in the favor of Luxembourg. But Wingspan at 15-1, I think presents some really intriguing value. And then the other horse I'll mention is Emily Upjohn. I've always loved her. I've always wanted her to get over here to the United States. I'm thrilled I'm going to be able to see her run in North America for the first time. Problem is she's just not won in a long time. Now, she's run against some tough competition. She's been running in nothing but Group 1s, basically most of her career. And so she's been running up against the best. And you see horses like Luxembourg and Rebels Romance and Sharyar and Paddington and Opera Singer and Blue Stocking and Content, who we'll get to in a second, in one of the other races. You see these horses, and she's running against outstanding competition. So I certainly get it, but she's won again last race, really good time form rating, finishing third behind Blue Stocking and Adventure. I think this one, I saw her in the paddock. She's physically very impressive. 5-1's a little short of a price for her from like a win bet standpoint. I'm curious if she ends up floating up a little bit. I have a feeling she might, but always hard to fade John and Taddy Gosden too far off your tickets. All right, well, listen, let's talk about the Turf Classic, or let's talk about the Turf Classic. Let's talk about just the Breeders' Cup Classic. Folks, I ultimately went with an international 3-year-old. I just didn't go with City of Troy. That's all. But let's talk about City of Troy before we get to my top pick, Forever Young. I'm fading the top 2 choices. Why? City of Young is trying to do something he's never done before, which is run on the dirt. If he takes to the dirt the way he does to the turf, everybody's running for second. I get it. And if he was 8-1, I'd be thrilled to take that bet. He's 5-2. I can't bet a horse that's 5-2 that's trying to do something that he's never done before against the best competition on this surface in the world. He's a horse that has good early speed, City of Troy. He doesn't have Arthur's ride speed, I'll tell you that. I don't think he's got Fierceness' speed. And there's a big difference between speed on the turf in Europe and speed on the dirt in North America. It's not to say American dirt racing is better than European turf racing. By no stretch am I saying that. I'm saying the dynamics are completely different. And that speed on one does not translate to speed in the other. And that just because you're fast over in Europe on the turf doesn't mean that you're going to be able to get that same sort of position when you're over here running a 23-second opening quarter mile in a way that you would never run that sort of pace over in Europe. So I'm going against City of Troy at a short price. I'm going against Fierceness a little bit. You'll see Fierceness is on the B level of my ticket. I'm playing against Fierceness a little, but not entirely. That said, the horse has strung 2 races together for the first time in his career. Now we're expecting him to run 3 great races in a row, this time against older competition, a deeper field than what he's ever faced before. I still have questions about him at 1.25 miles. So I'm just not, like I said, not 100% sold on Fierceness. But I like him. And by the way, people who think, well, I don't like Todd Pletcher. I love Todd Pletcher. I like Mike Rapoli. I actually really, really like Mike Rapoli. I have a really great Mike Rapoli story. I have so much respect for what he does and how he does it and how he treats people. And so this is far from me being a hater on Fierceness by no stretch. There's a big difference between, handicapping a race and hating on a horse. And I'm just handicapping a race from my standpoint. My ultimate top pick is Forever Young, 6-1. I don't think you'll get 6-1. I think you'll get 4-1, maybe 7-2. Yoshida Yahagi brought Japan their first 2 Breeders' Cup wins 3 years ago at Del Mar with Marshall Lorraine and Loves Only You. He's a world-class trainer. Everybody knows that. Forever Young is a nose away from being a perfect 7 for 7. And, oh, by the way, a nose away in a race there that probably should have looked at. But that's the water under the bridge. Won the UAE Derby, won the Saudi Derby, won the Japan Dirt Classic last time out despite stumbling out of the gate. That's the biggest issue with Forever Young. He does have gate issues from time to time. If he breaks clean, I think this race might be academic. I think he's that good. He looks to just be a different breed and different type of horse. And I think he's matured. He's filled out. He's gotten bigger over the time off. And second back now from a long layoff, shipping overseas for a trainer who knows how to get these horses ready and has had success with these horses here at Del Mar just gives me so much confidence in Forever Young. I think he can sit a few different types of trips. He's going to save all the ground from the inside. He moves beautifully, and he's a horse that gets stronger late in a race. Love this horse. And he has enough tactical speed that he's not going to be in the back with Senior Buscador and Sierra Leone. From the value play, I don't think you get anywhere near 20-1 on this horse. But Highland Falls is not just my value play, but my second choice. I love Highland Falls. Highland Falls in that Jockey Club Gold Cup, that was just a clinic that Flavien Prat put on from a riding standpoint. But this is a horse that I feel like has been perpetually underrated for a lot of his career because he kind of burst onto the scene really late. He didn't break his maiden as a 3. He didn't debut as a 3-year-old until after the Travers. So, and he did it down at Ellis Park. So you talk about a horse that just kind of gets lost in the crop. Those late developing 3-year-olds usually are lost and forgotten about. And that kind of is what it felt like. The horse it wins by a neck in debut at Ellis and then goes to Churchill, finishes third. Santa Anita and the Santa Anita handicap. And he ready to finish his fourth that day to Newgate and Subsanador. Two nice horses. Then comes back and runs second to Skippy Longstocking, who just got the jump that day, but runs a 104 buyer. Comes back to win the blame as your overwhelming favorite, the Cagliostro, who's a very nice horse. Then goes and has a tough inside trip, in my opinion, in the Monmouth Cup, and just poor tactical decision by Florent Giroux that day in terms of how to ride this horse. And then Pratt gave him just a beautiful ride, I thought, and hounding Arthur's ride in the Jockey Club Gold Cup. Gets the mile and a quarter. Godolphin owned, Godolphin bred, sired by Curlin, out of 2006 Distaff winner Round Pond. This one, like I said, loves the distance. Louis Saez is now aboard. Louis is going to be aggressive with this one, I would imagine. Get this horse out in a pretty comfortable position. I think probably sitting more of a pocket trip, sitting third or fourth in the early going on the inside rail. But I'm not worried about this one tiring late. That's for sure. Love Highland Falls at 20-1. The other horse I have on the A line is Next. And it's not out of fear. It's just because I think this horse, I don't want to get beat by Next. The 14 post is perfect. You go back and watch the Brooklyn Stakes 3 back. That's the blueprint for what we're going to see. That's a 2-turn race with starting out of a chute and going down the front stretch the whole way until you get to the first turn. He broke from the outside that day or from an outer post position that day and had the whole stretch. Luan Machado knows how to ride this horse. Horse has a high cruising speed, good early speed, not maybe elite early speed, but you have that long stretch to get up to speed. I anticipate this horse is going to be sitting wide. And guess what? If there's a horse that I'm not worried about distance with, it's Next. So that horse is sitting wide, going into the first turn, maybe sitting in the 4-path or something like that, but in the clear. I think that's the key with Next, is just keep him in the clear. And the question is, will he tire chasing or tracking or stalking a faster pace than what he's faced before? We won't know until Saturday afternoon. But here's the other thing I know about Next. We've never seen him asked for anything. Luan Machado sits like a statue on that horse and never asks him for his best. What is Next going to look like when he's asked for his best? And it's kind of the same argument I made with Thorpedo Anna in the Travers, that Brian Hernandez Jr. never asked her for everything she had. And when he finally did, lo and behold, she runs a 111 Beyer speed figure, which is 16 points higher than her previous race. That's a whole nother discussion that I have with Beyer speed figures, but I just think this horse, I think Next is sitting on a big effort. And I think this horse is a really serious threat from the far outside. Now, in terms of my B-level ticket, I already mentioned Fierceness being in there. The other two I'll mention are complete opposite ends of the spectrum, depending on how the race turns out. One is Arthur's Ride, and the other is Sierra Leone. Arthur's Ride, there's a version of this race where Arthur's Ride just goes to the front and nobody presses because there's no other need to lead horse in this race. So does Junior Alvarado, is he able to replicate the Whitney where he just got out up front and was able to go? I do have questions about a mile and a quarter. I know he got it 3 back, but I feel like that was a very speed favoring track that day, and that was also with Lasix against Optional Claiming Company. So there's a lot of ifs in there. But that said, he's going to get the potential pace set up if he's able to get out up front and control his own fractions. The other one is Sierra Leone, deep closer. The key is Flavien Prat, who knows Del Mar well, he's got to make the right move here. And what I mean by that is he's got to make the move around the turn. You can't wait to make your move turning for home at Del Mar because there's just not enough ground for you to make that to make it up. And that short stretch at Del Mar is a real thing to the finish line. I think it's about 70 feet shorter than Santa Anita. So it's not insignificant. And I think you need to be sitting, if you're Sierra Leone, you need to be sitting maybe 4th, maybe 5th at the absolute worst when you straighten out turning for home. You can't be 8 wide and sitting, 9th at that point. You have to have made your run and made up a lot of ground on the turn so that when you're turning for home, you have a chance. But if he's able to get the right sort of trip, the talent's always been there. Now you're finally getting a price at 12-1. So we'll see. In terms of the C level, the City of Troy, on my deepest of deep tickets would be there. And the other one is Derma Sotogake, who's getting the blinkers on. I've always carried the flag for Derma. I think that horse is just perpetually a bad luck horse. that has encountered so many different issues throughout his career. I think everything's finally going his way. He's been working out beautifully here. Don't be shocked. He ran second in this race last year. I think he could run a big race on Saturday. All right, let's go to the filly and mare turf. And I told you I'd want to talk about Content again, and here we are. Listen, I'm playing against Warlike Goddess in this race. I love her. Who doesn't love a 7-year-old mare? But I'm playing against her. 5-2, coming off a pair of runner-up finishes in the Flower Bowl and the Turf Classic. You can make excuses for both. She was running against the boys last time out, and in the Flower Bowl, it was just a stupidly slow pace and a terribly run race from a jockey standpoint. No, by the way, over-yielding surface. She still managed to get up for second and make up some ground on Idea Generation, who's not in this race or any other race this weekend. But I do wonder if she still has the A game in here. And to be fair to her, she's been running against the Breeders' Cup. She's been running against the boys for the most part the last 2 years. And then 3 years ago, she finished third by a half length to Love's Only You, my sister Nat, in that very famous race at Del Mar, which was another win for Japan. And that was the last time Julian Leparoux rode her. The issue is that Joel Rosario didn't really ride her that great, in my opinion. And I think he cost her at least 2 races with how he rode her. And then Junior Alvarado has ridden her. And I like the way Junior rides her, but she is not the easiest horse to ride at times. And she does get rank, and she does kind of get very fidgety in some instances. So I'm a little bit against her in this particular spot. The horse I ultimately landed on is number 7, Content, for Aidan O'Brien. Frankie Dettori is up on the mount, though I am curious to see what ends up happening with this, only because Elang Elang, who was Moore's other horse O'Brien's other horse in this race, had Ryan Moore up. That horse is scratching, so Moore is available, and I wonder if he bumps Dettori off the mount. I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see. Here's what I like about Content. The last 2 times out, just toss them. Just toss them. Both were over soft ground, one at Ascot, one at Longchamp. So toss those efforts. You go back to the 2 races before that, won a Group 1 and finished second by less than a length in a Group 1. And then the race before that was over yielding surface. And again, you look at the races against over yielding surface, they generally are going to be a problem. I think this horse gets better a little bit longer she goes. So I like going 1 mile and 3/8 here. The win 3 back was at 1.5 miles. Again, 6-1 for Aidan O'Brien. I like this one quite a bit. I also really considered the number 3, Cinderella's Dream. I think this horse is outstanding in her own right. She was nearly my top selection. She needs to get maybe a little bit faster. She's absolutely going to be on my tickets as an A in this race. She's proven to be the absolute class of the 3-year-old filly group by easily winning the Belmont Oaks and the Saratoga Oaks. Hasn't been run since. Appleby and Buick just team up for these sorts of horses and are just so tough to beat in the Breeders' Cup. I think she's one you got to take pretty seriously in this spot. And then my other A horse is the number 10, which is Moira. And that's my value play in this race. Listen, she ran huge in this race last year. She ran third to Inspireland Warmheart, 2 Euros that came over. And she didn't even have the best trip. Then she goes to the Diana off of a significant 8-month layoff. She runs second to Lone Speed and White Beam that day. Makes up a ton of ground, runs a huge speed figure. Comes back next time out, gets the better of Fev Rover, who beat her a couple of years ago at the Nassau. Beats her in the Beverly D at Colonial and gets the win. Then goes up to the EP Taylor, where stablemate Full Count Felicia and Kazushi Kimura, the jockey, and credit to Kazushi, go about 15 lengths clear of the field, maybe 20 lengths clear of the field. And just say the heck with it. Nobody's catching us. And indeed, nobody caught them. And so she was the only horse to really be making up ground late there, finishes second ultimately, but it's kind of an odd pace dynamic. 8-1 in the morning line. Flavian Pratt now up on the mount. He's ridden this horse before, rode her in last year's Breeders' Cup filly and mare turf. I think this horse at 8-1 has a real chance to surprise. I like Moira quite a bit in this particular spot. Now, in terms of my B ticket structure, where am I going? I do think the number 4 Warlike Goddess it's got to be in there. Listen, it's just that simple. And then the other one that I really like is the number 12 Soprano. for George Bowie with Billy Lofton aboard. This horse finished second to She Feels Pretty in the Queen Elizabeth Cup, but that was the first start in North America. I think the horse is continuing to stretch out, which maybe is a little concerning, but I think the fact this horse is going here rather than the mile kind of tells you that they think the horse can go a little bit longer, quite frankly. And maybe they're just wanting to stay against, strictly fillies and mares in this particular spot. But the fact that the horse came over and got a race under her belt feels very intentional here in the United States. And now you're going a mile and 3/8. This horse was making up ground late and kind of passing other horses late. Like I said, ultimately, She Feels Pretty just blew them all away. But I think this one has run against some outstanding horses like Porta Fortuna. And so I'm willing to use this one at 20-1 as a little bit of a value play. All right. Well, let's move to the sprint. This is a race filled with speed. And I got to give a shout out to my good friend Chase Sessions, the Wolf of Oak Lawn, who has never seen a sprint that he doesn't think the pace will melt down in. And this is one time, Chase, where I agree with you. Raging Torrent from the inside rail has got to go. Federal Judge for Brad Cox only knows one way to run, and that is to go. Don Frankie from Japan, that horse is going to go. Then you look at a horse like Metamax, probably not. Straight No Chaser, hello, that horse is speed. Then you look at a horse like Remake, could be a little interesting. I'll talk about that in a second. Mulligan is going to have to go. Skelly is going to have to go from the outside. So now you have Raging Torrent, Federal Judge, Don Frankie, Straight No Chaser, Mulligan, and Skelly all wanting to go. That sets up for a closer. That sets up for somebody who goes, you guys have been going entirely too fast. And in my opinion, that is Nakatomi. Nakatomi likes to come from off the base and just lost the Federal Judge last time out. I get it. The Federal Judge just got loose in a way that Federal Judge is not going to get loose anymore. Look at that race 2 back and the Alfred G. Vanderbilt. That was a great effort. 3 back, loses to Don Frankie, finishes behind Tuz, who won by a mile, and then he was right there with Don Frankie in that race, the horse from Japan. I know Nakatomi has a kind of a reputation of not always winning much, but I felt like that Alfred G. Vanderbilt was a real breakthrough. I think the race sets up beautifully for Nakatomi at 6-1. Wesley Ward, Tyler Gaffleone. This one's it's going to be on my A line of my ticket, like this one quite a bit. I'm also going to be including Federal Judge on the A line, in part because this horse is just trained by Brad Cox. I mean, this horse, it was taken over by Rudy Brissett. It was from Rudy Brissett's horse. It was taken over from Rudy Brissett by Brad Cox. And this horse has just gotten freakishly fast the last couple of times out. And maybe this horse is just a freak now, and Irad Ortiz Jr. is aboard, and that's all she wrote. Maybe that's it. Maybe it's as simple as that, and Cox winning 26 to 27% of his Breeders' Cup starts in his career. So if it's that simple, then it's that simple. And I don't want to overthink it. But if I'm using Federal Judge, I don't want to use too many other horses on the A line. Nakatomi is the other one that I'll be using. The kind of crazy idea that I have is Ben Tornado. And Ben Tornado is 30-1 for Jose D'Angelo. And the horse, if you go through line by line, makes all the sense. Wins in debut, then wins of open company stakes race going 6 furlongs at Gulfstream Park. Then wins 2 more Florida restricted Sire Series races. Then steps up and runs in a 2-turn, mile and a 16th Florida Sire Series race. Finishes 3rd, but really takes a step back. D'Angelo goes, okay, we're just going to stick to kind of 1-turn races. Takes the horse over to the Saudi Derby, where the horse finishes 3rd behind Hello, Forever Young, and Grade 1 winner Bookham Dano. Finishes 3rd that day. Comes back, first race off the bench in 6 months, is up at Charlestown going 2 turns in kind of an oddly configured race, loses to Valentine Candy, but finishes 2nd that day, and then comes back to win the Gallant Bob last time out at Parks. The horse is getting progressively faster and firing off some ridiculously good workouts. I just think that at 30-1, this horse is interesting to me. If you want to have a crazy idea, that's my crazy idea for the week. But that's one that I really like quite a bit. Now, in terms of a value play, or in terms of the rest of my ticket structure, I should say, the 8 and the 10. So Mulligan, absolutely for Rudy Brissett. Depending on how things shake out, could this horse get the distance? I like this horse a little bit more in some ways because the horse has handled 7 furlongs the last few times out. And again, is a little bit of a speedball, but has at least shown the ability to rate a little bit. And Flavian Pratt stays aboard here, which I think is a big deal with Rudy Brissett, rather than staying on Federal Judge for Brad Cox, who he rode for last time and has ridden for a few times. But, usually Flavian rides for Rudy and doesn't ride for Cox quite as much. So kind of an interesting dynamic there. And then Straight No Chaser. Again, if this race isn't going to melt down, then I kind of want to, on the B level, have some of these speed horses that maybe just get loose because somebody, doesn't break well, or somebody just catches a flyer and they're suddenly up. And so Straight No Chaser is a horse that's got loads of speed. As long as that horse breaks well, the horse is going to run well. And honestly, the horse, 3 of the last 4 times out, has run huge races. The only time he didn't run particularly well was in the Run Happy, which was coming off almost a year layoff, and he had the inside rail. So I think this horse, again, very, very talented horse coming off a grade 2 win last time out, is going to be on the B line there. And on the C line, if you really want to start getting deep here, I do think a horse like Remake, my good friend Carlos Morales for a Huntus 305. I talked to him. You can find that interview up on X. But I talked to him. He really thinks Remake is moving nicely. Looks like a really good potential upset winner in this particular race. And then the number 11 Skelly. Skelly, I probably will actually end up leaving off my tickets. I just think this horse is a little bit of a money burner and has just developed a little bit of a knack of having trouble coming out of the gate. So I know the horse is 10 for 18 winning lifetime, 17 for 18 in the money lifetime. Hard to bet against the horse entirely, but a lot of this horse's biggest successes were at Oaklawn Park, and the Breeders' Cup ain't at Oaklawn Park. So let's go to the penultimate race, which is the mile. In my opinion, this is the toughest race of the entire card, and I promptly went with chalk. Notable speech. At some point, you have to kind of believe the hype. When Charlie Appleby says, "This is the most talented 3-year-old I've ever brought to the Breeders' Cup," you take notice. The horse lost last time out over soft ground. I'm willing to forgive that. The horse lost in a mile-long straight 3 back at the St. James Palace. I actually think going around turns is going to be beneficial to this horse. This horse, I think the best version of this horse wins this race most of the time. And so it's 7-2. You're at least getting some decent value. Notable speech, a very, very, very tough customer in this particular spot. Has run against some outstanding horses. Last time I was running against a horse like Charon, who's just tremendous. So I'm willing to, like I said, roll the dice with this one at 7-2. Now, from a ticket structure standpoint, the only horse that I think can challenge is Porta Fortuna, and for Donica O'Brien with Tarmar Quandabard. And I think this one could be, again, a really good horse. And this one, last 3 times out, Group 1 win at the Coronation, Group 1 win at the Falmouth, and Group 1 win at the Matron. She's proven to be the class and loves the good mile, has handled turns. So I'm not worried about that. And I just think this horse, she's really impressive. And if you remember, she finished second to Hard to Justify last year in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Filly Turf in a really contentious race that went right down to the wire, was making up a ton of ground late. I think she has just gotten that much better as a 3-year-old, sired by Caravaggio, who I absolutely love as a sire. And I just think Porta Fortuna, again, 4-1. I know it's your second choice, but those are my top 2. And if those are my top 2, then I'm not going to go any deeper than that, certainly on my A line. Now, from a B standpoint, you could look at something like, if you want to look at the inside rail and the 1, Ramatoulay, a very good horse from France. Did win going 7 furlongs on the turf, over a soft turf, I should say, last time out. And I do wonder about whether she prefers softer ground. She's won over firm ground, so that's not to say she can't. But I think 3 of the 4 wins, 3 of the 4 wins were over soft ground. And so I do wonder if that's maybe a little bit of a question mark there. Sired by Justify. So again, sire we're familiar with and a pedigree we're familiar with, but it would be interesting to see. I mean, beat a horse like Kinross last time out, who I've loved. Kinross, a great horse, but 2 races before that lost to Porta Fortuna and Opera Singer, and has never proven to be the better of Porta Fortuna, and that's why she's 5-1. but willing to kind of maybe play against that one a little bit on the top line. Diego Velasquez for Aidan O'Brien. This horse has been rumored to have wanted to get a race in overseas, but or like over here in the United States, but has not been able to do so for a variety of reasons. Ultimately, they wanted to run the horse at Saratoga. The race got taken off. They wanted to race the horse at Kentucky Downs. That didn't end up materializing. So this horse has been locked and ready to go for a little while, it feels like. Certainly a very talented one, winning the Solana Way last time out, winning the Meld 2-back. Those were Group 2, Group 3 races, so maybe a little bit of a class test, but Ryan Moore up. I think Diego Velasquez, you got to take pretty seriously here. The 8 is the other one, More Than Looks, and this is my value play for Cherie DeVaux. I'm all the way against Carl Spackler in this race. That pains me to say as a Caddyshack fan, as I'm a former competitive golfer, actually, granted, just in the high school ranks, but still. Nevertheless, More Than Looks, that's a horse that I think she's been running against the dynamics the last couple of times out. I think she gets more pace this time to run into. She's a deep closer for sure. Jose Ortiz has got to make a little bit of an earlier move around that turn, but she's one that's just got a wicked turn of foot when he, I should say, lets go. And I think More Than Looks at 20-1 is outstanding value. I don't think you get 20-1, but outstanding value in that particular spot. So really like More Than Looks as well if you're going a little bit deeper on your tickets. All right, well, let's close it out with the Dirt Mile. Where am I going here? Sometimes you got to put your money where your mouth is. And I said about 8 months ago that I thought Saudi Crown was a lock for the Dirt Mile. And you know something? Sometimes you just got to pony up and go, listen, I'm going to stick with it. I'm doubling down on my position. I think Saudi Crown is a slightly lesser version of Life is Good. I think he's elite at a mile, and I think at 9 furlongs, he can get it under the right circumstances. You go back and look at that Saudi Cup. He ran one of the more incredible races that you're going to see up on the lead, and nearly won in a race that was won by 2 deep closers, Senior Buscador and Ushma Tesoro. Then comes back and bounces from that effort big time. Finishes just completely off the screen in the Godolphin Mile in Maidan. Comes back, runs in the RA Cowboy Jones at Ellis Park, and wins that race as the 3-5 favorite, first race back, workmanlike, but solid. I had spoken to some people who said they were targeting the ACK, but there was so much rain from Hurricane Helene that they decided not to go to that race. And as a result, the horse has not run since. But if there's any trainer that I trust with this sort of a spot, it is Brad Cox. This horse can get a mile and an eighth. This horse is dominant at a mile, I think. And I know there's other speed in this race. You can look at a horse like Seize the Gray. Certainly. You could look at a horse like Tio Saint Denis. We'll see. Tio Saint Denis could just decide to run just for fun and do all sorts of crazy things. Full Serrano's got speed. So there's other speed in this race. Like I said, Seize the Gray certainly has speed. And you have to be respectful of that. Muth is probably going to want to track from off the pace. Pipeline has good speed, but drew the 14 and 13 post. Skippy Longstocking on the 14 post. I'm kind of fading a couple of those. And because, again, you don't have a lot of ground going into that first turn. So I'm kind of fading those outside post positions for the most part, with one notable exception. And like I said, I just think Saudi Crown has got the inside rail. I think Florent Giroux just sends hard. I think he gets to the lead. I think he takes them all the way around on a track that favors speed because he has the foundation to go longer. And I think they can try to press him, and it's not going to matter. I think he's that good. So 5-1, I'll take my chances with him. My value play is Mufasa. I always love when Ignacio Correas IV brings up horses from Latin America. This one coming up from Chile, runs for the first time in 6 months and finishes a little further back that day to a couple of horses, Gulfport and Two Eagles River. Two Eagles River actually ran really well the other day in a pretty nice race at Keeneland. That was won by Cape Trafalgar, actually. Safi's horse. Anyway, Mufasa then steps up, wins an optional claimer the next time out and at Colonial, and then comes up to the Vosburg and just blows out the competition and just easily wins in the slop, going 7 furlongs and running a 97 buyer. Has a 99 buyer the race before that. That one was with Lasix, but answered the question of going off Lasix. The horse ran 1.25 miles down in Chile. He won at 1.125 miles. Okay. Twice he wanted a mile and an eighth. He can get the distance. I'm not worried about the conditioning here. He can handle 2 turns. That's not a problem. I think this horse has good speed, will be able to save some ground by crossing and clearing a little bit. 10 wins and 13 career starts. Again, I just think this horse, there's a lot to like here. And I think at 12-1, you're getting really good value. From a tickets construction standpoint, like I said, those are my 2 A's. My B's are going to be post time for Brittany Russell, a horse that can come from off the pace in case there is too much speed in this race. And one that I think has a lot of talent on his best day, ran 3rd in the Whitney, actually and earned a 105 buyer, but this is one who has a couple of 100+ buyers. And then domestic product. If this was around 1 turn, domestic product would probably be a single for me. I just don't know about the 2-turn dynamics. Coming out of the A-Challenge Jerkins, running against Older for the first time, I think there are some questions to answer there with domestic product. I really like this horse a lot. Is on my B line, but I'm not going to use him on my A line and my shorter tickets. All right. Listen, folks, appreciate you sticking with me through all 9 races for the Breeders' Cup Day. There's other races too earlier in the card. We just didn't cover those. But the 9 Breeders' Cup races, appreciate you sticking with me through it. Always fun. Make sure to press that like and subscribe button. Hopefully we can catch some tickets together. If you're out at Del Mar, come say hi. Love to see you and hang out for a little bit. But listen, folks, it's been a fun Breeders' Cup season. Appreciate everybody's support on the NYRA Bets YouTube channel. Checking out all of our content really means a lot. All the kind words, the likes, the comments, really thank you so much. And until next time, friends, my name is Matthew DeSantis. Wishing you a great and prosperous day at the races and the Breeders' Cup. And reminding you, it's now post time.